from the News Channel 5 network. This is OpenLine.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Davis filling in for OpenLine tonight. You know, a lot of times we get into really deep topics here in OpenLine. Sometimes it can be contentious topics. Tonight, that is not the case. We have a fun show for you tonight. We are talking about the Oscar nominations that have been recently announced. And of course, we'll be getting to the show before we even know it. So to break it all down with us tonight, we have Jason Shawhan here tonight. He is a film critic and can get into all of this with us tonight. Jason, first kind of just give us your background into what you know about films and why you're a good guest for us tonight.
I am one of the film writers for the Nashville Scene. I used to write for the AV Club. Here and there, I publish all over the place. But I've been a professional film critic for over 20 years now. I went to school to study like the critical angle of it in New York, and then I studied the actual physical production of it, like working with cameras and developing film and editing and such at the old sorely missed Watkins Institute. So I've got I made a point. I was just like, if I knew my theory, I was like, I need to know the physics of this too, how you actually have to physically make one of these things, because it's two different disciplines in the same art form, and it's just it's always good to like just do the due diligence and figure out what you're talking about.
Absolutely. You know, Jason, this has been such an interesting time for filmmaking with the pandemic. A lot of film crews have had to recreate how they do things as well to stay safe. And a lot of these films, obviously, that have come out, you know, in this award season were made in these type of interesting situations. Do you feel like COVID-19 has impacted some of these Oscar nominations?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like the first thing foremost are like the films that were done before the pandemic, but their release plans were dependent on, like people having access to theaters. So like, there are a lot of things that have been delayed for like a year or two that are finally coming out, alongside things that were made during the pandemic under like safety conditions where they had like, dedicated technicians on set making sure that, everyone was like, that there was no transmission happening on set. And it's fascinating just because like, if you don't know when you're watching a film, like if you can't tell, oh, well, this was made so-and-so, that's fascinating to me, because that means that like, we are able to like, well, the whole thing with film is that like, it's an amazing art form based on illusion, because like all we see is the frame in front of us. Everything that's going on, beside that, underneath it, above it, you've got lights, you've got people with microphones, you've got all these unseen factors that are affecting this, but we don't see that. So it's sort of like, at least for the time being, COVID safety protocols have become another thing like that. It's like the grip who's handling, making sure that these props get where they need to be. It's just an aspect of filmmaking now for at least the time being, which is it's fascinating, because it's more jobs. That's a good thing. More jobs is always a good thing.
Absolutely.
But it's also, it's like procedurally, like I have friends who are production managers who like organize film and television sets and that sort of thing. And I can't imagine like how, to most of it's just like, oh, it's just another layer of things. But to them, I can't even imagine that. It's just, it's sort of like, if you work with a forklift and then you come in and just like, oh, we've added another thing to this forklift. That's a very strained simile, but you know what I mean? It's just like, it's like you have this process that you've been working in, and then all of a sudden, as a matter of life and death, that changes overnight. So like, there definitely needs to be special awards for production managers who've had to deal with new COVID protocols.
No doubt about it. There is a reason why those credit lists are so long at the end of films, because it's quite the undertaking. And like you mentioned, I mean, and we experienced some of that on the broadcast end too. But you walk in one day, or you get an email one day, and suddenly every process that you've ever done has changed by a global pandemic. And like you said, the stakes were high, and the fact that it was such a dangerous pandemic as well. So with that in mind, do you think that the films were selections or actors that we had to choose from? Were they a little less than we might normally have, or was Hollywood pretty resilient in being able to have the same kind of films that we're used to seeing?
Hollywood is always resilient. Like every few weeks, you'll see an article saying like, oh, is it over for theatrical exhibition? What are we going to do? Hollywood is always resilient, because if they can't make, like multi-$100 million action spectacles that are very easy to export all over the world, there's always acquisitions. There's always like somebody with some of their friends in Oklahoma or whatever who are like, who get together and make a movie and do something different. So, if Hollywood can't have, Bruce Willis save the moon or whatever, I'm spitballing on that, they can find something from somewhere else and just be like, oh, well, we can put this out there. This has a hook that audiences might respond to. So there's always going to be stuff there. It's just a question of our access to it and if it's what we expect from films. But like it was very much the case in the late 90s when there was this huge boom in independent cinema, when like all the major studios were starting their independent or art house divisions, and just like, and some of those are still around today. It's just, you can make art of any kind that you want, and what's fortunate is that there's always going to be a company who knows what to do with it, as long as like the people who made the art can hold out long enough to find them. It's like a sad Valentine's Day romance. You just hope you find the studio that's going to show the love to your film and get it out there to the rest of the world.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, I've got a lot of questions for Jason. We want to answer yours as well. So the number is on your screen. If you have any questions about just the filmmaking process that, of course, we've gotten into the beginning here, you can call in with your questions. But the real deal of why we wanted to bring you on tonight, Jason, is to talk about some of these nominations. So if we go ahead and bring up actor in a leading role for our first category, we've got the list on a graphic for you here. Some of these films, some of you may have seen, some of you may have not. So we can just kind of talk about all of them. The first one there listed on there, Javier Bardem for Being the Ricardos. That's a film about the Ricardos and the making of I Love Lucy. Jason, what really stood out for that movie for you?
Well, I went into that film expecting a disaster. It had a terrible trailer, and I was just sort of like, but shame on me for doubting Nashville's own Nicole Kidman, because like that film is chock full of really great performances. I mean, 3 of the 4 main leads got nominations, and sadly Nina Arianda, who I think actually delivers the best performance in the film, was ignored, which you got to do whatever. But like Javier Bardem, he's a treasure. He's really, really good in that film, taking an icon. Like, he doesn't look like Desi Arnaz, but he's done the work and like studied like the mannerisms and the way that he interacts with his wife, and he does the work on that, and I absolutely dig it. He's just as entertaining in Being the Ricardos as he was as Stilgar in Dune. So, and that's a heck of a year right there. If you can land both of those performances, maximum respect from me on that.
Absolutely. Great dialogue in that film. Aaron Sorkin wrote it, so you could expect that if you're a fan of him. But yeah, I really enjoyed watching that one. Another one that's a big thinker, you and I were talking about before the show, Benedict Cumberbatch is nominated an actor in a leading role on that list. Power of the Dog, that is one you and I were talking about earlier. You almost have to watch more than once to really get the gist of.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, you can't go wrong with the kinky Western. But that film, it's great. It's like it deserves to be spoken of in the same way that like M. Night Shyamalan's best films are, because it is one of those that like once you're on it, it is a roller coaster. It's moving slowly, deliberately, but a roller coaster nonetheless. And when it's over, the fun is going for that ride again, knowing what you know, because that film yields untold dividends with repeat viewings. I mean, Jane Campion is always like that. Like, her films are always designed that for you to live with them, for you to see them at different points in your lives and re-experience them. But yeah, Power of the Dog is like I loved it the first time I saw it, and then the second time I saw it, I was just like, oh yeah, this is something very special.
Absolutely. Don't want to give any spoilers on it, but it's worth your time. That one's on Netflix. A lot of people have Netflix subscriptions. Really.
And Being the Ricardos is on Amazon Prime.
That's right. So both some streaming options, which is a whole another topic we could talk about how that's impacted Hollywood. Andrew Garfield, the next one on the list, on actor in a leading role in Tick, Tick, Boom. That's an interesting one, and the fact it's a musical about making a musical, right?
Yeah. It's the piece that Jonathan Larson wrote before he did Rent, which was which was a huge smash both critically and with audiences. And then Jonathan Larson died the night that Rent premiered. So this is the work that he did before that, and Andrew Garfield is great in it. He can act, he can sing, he can dance. I got to see him in a production of Angels in America. They did a live simulcast of that, and it was just like, and he was tackling like heavy Tony Kushner dialogue and knocking it out of the park. And then it's like, it's not just that he's great in Tick, Tick, Boom, and that he's got the Tony and the Olivier for Angels in America, but also he's incredible in Spider-Man No Way Home this year. Like, and that, like, he does the emotional heavy lifting in that one. And I honestly feel like that part of that residual Spider-Man goodwill, because I mean, like, face it saved the box office this year. So like, people are aware of that. And I think that could definitely help his chances as far as getting a Best Actor Oscar for it, because it's not just this great performance here. It's also, he's doing other things that are, like bringing in the money and getting people to, go to the movies. So he's an interesting talent, and I'm glad that he's going to continue doing stuff like that and taking weird chances.
Absolutely. Jason, we have two more on the list to get into Best Actor. We will get to those on the other side of this break. But just so you know, you don't have to be the only one. I don't have to be the only one, I should say, asking Jason Shawhan questions. Feel free to call in during the break with your questions as well. We'll have more after the break.